Do you want something from me too, rancher? The Black Widow's voice cracks like dried earth as she stumbles toward the giant cowboy, her torn mourning dress trailing dust across the unforgiving desert. The townsfolk spit when they whisper her name. 3 dead husbands, cursed blood, a woman marked for the gallows. She is destined to hang for murders she swears she never committed, fleeing bounty hunters with nothing but the clothes on her back. But the mountain man sees past the rumors, offering water to the trembling woman despite warnings that helping her means signing his own death warrant. Hidden beneath her desperation lies a secret inheritance that could make her the most powerful landowner in the territory, if she lives long enough to claim it. Will his unexpected kindness prove genuine, or will she discover that even this gentle giant harbors motives that could destroy them both? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The desert sun blazed mercilessly as Eliza Hargraves stumbled across the cracked earth. Her black mourning dress clung to her skin, torn from thorns and weighted with dust. Behind her, the faint sound of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. The bounty hunters were getting closer. She had been running for 3 days now. Water gone, hope nearly spent. The accusations followed her like vultures circling overhead. Black Widow, they called her. 3 husbands dead, all under mysterious circumstances. Her legs buckled. She caught herself against a weathered fence post, gasping. Through blurred vision, she spotted a modest ranch house nestled against the red rocks. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. James Maxwell looked up from mending his fence line. A woman in black stumbled toward his property, moving like death itself was chasing her. He recognized her immediately, despite the dust and desperation. Everyone in 3 counties knew that face. Eliza Hargraves. The woman they said killed her husbands for money. James set down his tools. She collapsed 20 feet from his fence, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. He could leave her there. Probably should. The smart thing would be to ride into town and collect the reward money. Instead, he grabbed his water canteen. Eliza's eyes fluttered open as cool liquid touched her lips. A massive figure knelt beside her, silhouetted against the burning sky. She jerked back, spilling precious water. "Easy now," James said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "You're safe." Safe. The word sounded foreign. Eliza studied his weathered face, searching for the familiar signs of greed or lust. Men always wanted something, always had a price. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. James helped her sit up. "Nothing, ma'am. Just doing what's right." She almost laughed. What's right? As if anything in her life had ever been about what was right. Her 3 marriages had been business arrangements. Her father's mining fortune made her valuable property. Each husband had died trying to claim the hidden gold he'd left behind. "You know who I am," she said. "I know what people say." "And you believe them?" James considered this. The whole territory whispered about the Black Widow. 3 husbands dead in 5 years. Benjamin fell down a mine shaft. Samuel died when his horse threw him near a cliff. Robert drowned crossing a river during a storm, all while chasing rumors of hidden gold. "I believe you need help," he said finally. Eliza stared at him. This mountain of a man with calloused hands and kind eyes. Either he was the best actor she'd ever met, or he was genuinely trying to help her. Both possibilities terrified her. "They're hunting me," she said. "Sheriff Clayton has wanted posters, claims I poisoned them all." Clayton Hargraves, Robert's younger brother. He'd always resented that Robert married into money while he scraped by on a lawman's salary. Now he had a chance to claim the Hargraves name meant something. Bounty hunters? 3 of them. Maybe more by now. James glanced toward the horizon. No dust clouds yet, but they'd come eventually. Harboring a suspected murderess would destroy his reputation. Might get him killed. "Can you ride?" he asked. Eliza nodded, though her legs felt like water. James helped her to the house, supporting most of her weight. Inside, the simple cabin felt like a palace. Clean, peaceful. Nothing like the grand houses where she'd played the dutiful wife while her husbands schemed. He set out bread and dried meat, filled a basin with water so she could wash the dust from her face. Never once did his hands linger. Never once did his eyes suggest payment would be expected. "Why?" she asked. James settled into a chair across from her. Fought in the war. Saw plenty of folks who needed help. Learned the hard way what happens when good people do nothing. The war changed you? Changed everyone who lived through it. Eliza ate slowly, watching him. James moved with the controlled grace of a man accustomed to violence but weary of it. His hands bore scars from more than ranch work. Whatever he'd seen during the war had carved lines around his eyes that spoke of hard choices and harder consequences. I could bring you trouble, she said. Trouble has a way of finding me anyway. Through the window, Eliza spotted riders in the distance. Her blood turned to ice. They're here. James moved to the window. 3 men on horseback, still a mile out but closing fast. He recognized the type. Hard men who killed for money and called it justice. Back room, he said. Stay quiet. You don't understand. They'll burn this place down if they have to. Let me worry about that. Eliza gripped his arm. The question that had haunted her through 3 marriages rose in her throat like bile. The words that defined her relationship with every man she'd ever known. Do you want something from me too, rancher? The heartbreak in her voice stopped James cold. Here was a woman who'd never known kindness without a price, never experienced protection without obligation. Every man in her life had taken something. James covered her hand with his own. Ma'am, I want nothing but the chance to prove not all men are the same. The riders drew closer. In minutes, they'd be at his door with questions he couldn't answer and demands he wouldn't meet. His peaceful life was about to end, and they both knew it. The bounty hunters reined up outside James's cabin. Dust swirled around their horses as boots hit the ground. James stepped onto his porch, rifle cradled casually in his arms. Afternoon, gentlemen. The lead rider, a wiry man with dead eyes, spat into the dirt. We're tracking a fugitive. Woman in black. Goes by Eliza Hargraves. Haven't seen anyone matching that description. Mind if we look around? James's grip tightened on his rifle. I do mind, actually. This is private property. The bounty hunter's hand drifted toward his pistol. His companions spread out, flanking the porch. 3 against 1. Bad odds, but James had faced worse during the war. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, friend. I'm not your friend. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then the lead rider smiled coldly and remounted his horse. We'll be watching, he said. She can't hide forever. They rode off, leaving threats and dust in their wake. James waited until they disappeared before returning inside. He found Eliza pressed against the backroom wall, trembling. They're gone, he said. For now. That evening, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain. James checked his animals while Eliza helped prepare the barn for shelter. She moved with surprising efficiency, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. You know ranching, he observed. My father owned mining claims. Kept cattle, too. Before the marriages? Eliza's jaw tightened. Before everything went wrong. The first drops of rain began to fall as darkness settled over the desert. Within minutes, the storm unleashed its fury. Rain hammered the roof like gunshots. Wind screamed through the canyon walls. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars. Water began seeping under the cabin door. James grabbed supplies and headed for the barn. We need to move. This place floods in heavy storms. They ran through the downpour, boots splashing in rapidly forming puddles. The barn offered better shelter, built on higher ground with thick walls. James lit a lantern while Eliza secured the door against the howling wind. Thunder crashed overhead. The storm's violence seemed to echo something wild and broken inside Eliza. She paced the barn like a caged animal, years of buried fear finally surfacing. Benjamin was the first, she said suddenly. My father arranged the marriage, said Benjamin would protect his mining interests after he died. James listened without judgment. The storm raged around them, creating a strange intimacy in the flickering lamplight. Benjamin died 3 months after the wedding, fell down a mine shaft while looking for my father's hidden gold. Samuel lasted 6 months. Thrown from his horse near Devil's Canyon, Robert made it a year before the river took him. All accidents? That's what I thought. Each one died chasing rumors of buried treasure. My father hid gold somewhere before he passed, left cryptic clues. Every husband became obsessed with finding it. Lightning illuminated the barn in stark white flashes. Eliza's face looked haunted, carved from shadow and regret. The town started calling me cursed, then cursed became murderous. Easier to blame the woman than admit their precious men died from their own greed. James moved closer. You loved any of them? Love was never part of the arrangement. The admission hung between them like a physical presence. Here was a woman who'd never known affection without calculation, never experienced desire without transaction. What about you? She asked. Ever married? Came close once, before the war. What happened? I happened. Came back different. She couldn't live with what I'd become. Thunder shook the barn walls. Rain pounded harder, finding every crack and crevice. They were trapped together until the storm passed, two damaged souls sharing space and secrets. Eliza stopped pacing. The question that defined her existence rose in her throat again, more desperate than before. Do you want something from me too, rancher? The words came out broken, barely audible above the storm. James saw the truth in her eyes. Every kindness in her life had carried a price. Every protection had demanded payment. She'd never known a man who helped without expecting something in return. I want nothing but the chance to prove not all men are the same. Eliza's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks. I don't know how to trust anymore. Then I'll wait until you do. The storm continued its assault through the night. They shared the barn's warmth, talking in quiet voices about their scars. James spoke of battles that still haunted his dreams. Eliza revealed the loneliness of her loveless marriages. Near dawn, exhaustion finally claimed them. They slept in separate corners of the barn, but something fundamental had changed. The barriers between them had begun to crack. Morning brought clear skies and a letter. The mail rider had left it at the cabin before the storm hit. Eliza's hands shook as she recognized the lawyer's seal from Colorado. Inside, news that would change everything. Her Aunt Margaret had died, leaving behind a vast cattle ranch and substantial holdings. The inheritance made Eliza one of the wealthiest landowners in the territory. She stared at the letter, mind racing. This changed the game completely. She was no longer a desperate fugitive dependent on charity. She was a woman of means with options and power. But would James's kindness survive this revelation? Would he remain the same gentle man when he learned she could buy and sell his ranch 10 times over? Eliza folded the letter carefully. This would be the ultimate test. She'd keep the inheritance secret and see if his character held true. Eliza tucked the inheritance letter deep in her dress pocket. The knowledge burned against her ribs like a brand. Overnight, she'd transformed from penniless fugitive to cattle baroness. But James couldn't know. Not yet. She watched him tend his small herd, noting the careful way he rationed feed. The modest ranch barely turned a profit. His clothes were mended, his boots worn thin. This man had offered everything to help a stranger who appeared to have nothing. Now she would discover if his kindness survived, when he believed she truly had nothing to give. Your fence line needs repair, she said, approaching with coffee. James accepted the cup gratefully. Storm knocked down 3 posts. I'll get to it. Show me how. I can help. He studied her face, searching for hidden motives. Finding none, he nodded. Works hard on the hands. My hands have worked before. They spent the morning replacing fence posts. Eliza's knowledge surprised him. She understood livestock, recognized good grazing land, spotted problems with practiced eyes. Her fingers moved with confidence around tools and rope. Where'd you learn ranching? He asked. Father's operation. I managed his books, planned rotations, negotiated sales. Your husband's let you work? Eliza's expression hardened. My husband's preferred I stay decorative and quiet. James watched her hammer a post with controlled fury. Here was a woman whose talents had been wasted, whose intelligence had been dismissed. Her marriages had been cages disguised as partnerships. By afternoon, they'd repaired the entire damaged section. Eliza's dress was torn and dirty, her hands scraped raw. She'd never looked more alive. You're good at this, James said. I missed it. That evening, as they shared a simple supper, Eliza made her decision. The ultimate test of his character required complete vulnerability. James, I need to tell you something. He set down his fork, giving her full attention. I inherited my aunt's ranch in Colorado. It's substantial. Makes me quite wealthy." The words hung in the air like smoke. James's expression didn't change. He simply nodded and resumed eating. "That's good news," he said finally. Eliza waited for the shift, for his demeanor to change now that he knew she had money, for the calculations to begin behind his eyes, the way men looked at her when they realized what she was worth. Nothing came. "You're not surprised?" she asked. "Figured you came from money. The way you handle yourself, your education. Rich folks don't usually end up penniless by accident. This changes things." "How so?" Eliza stared at him in disbelief. "I could buy 10 ranches this size." "Still doesn't change who you are." The simplicity of his response staggered her. No increased attention, no sudden romantic interest, no suggestions about how her money could improve their situation. He treated her exactly the same as when he'd believed she was destitute. Over the following days, they fell into an easy partnership. Eliza used her business knowledge to help James plan improvements. He taught her practical skills her privileged upbringing had missed. Neither mentioned the inheritance again. The bounty hunters returned twice, searching the area with growing frustration. Each time, James met them with calm defiance. His reputation in the community began to suffer. Neighbors whispered about the rancher harboring the Black Widow. "You should turn me in," Eliza said, after a particularly tense confrontation. "Collect the reward. Save your standing." "My standing isn't worth your life." "Why? You barely know me." James paused in his work, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. "War taught me something. Good people are rarer than gold, worth protecting when you find them." "How do you know I'm good people?" "The way you work, the way you treat my animals, the way you've never once asked me to use my rifle on those hunters." It was true. Despite her fear, Eliza had never suggested violence as a solution. She'd grown up surrounded by men who solved problems with force. James was the first to show her there were other ways. On the 5th day, while repairing the barn roof, Eliza made a disturbing discovery. Hidden in James's saddlebags was a collection of legal documents and newspaper clippings, all related to mysterious deaths of wealthy widows across 3 territories. She read with growing horror. Sarah Blackwood of Arizona died falling downstairs, fortune claimed by distant relative. Martha Cunningham of Texas trampled by horses, estate seized by supposed creditor. Patricia Monroe of New Mexico poisoned by bad water, property sold at auction to anonymous buyer. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone was systematically murdering wealthy women and stealing their inheritances through legal manipulation. At the bottom of the stack, she found correspondence between James and a federal investigator named Marshall Catherine Stone. James had been gathering evidence for months, tracking the killer across state lines. "Found my research?" Eliza spun around. James stood in the barn doorway, expression unreadable. "You're investigating the murders." "Started after Martha Cunningham died. She was a friend's widow, good woman. Her death made no sense." "And you think they're connected to my situation?" "I think your Sheriff Clayton knows more than he's letting on." The pieces clicked together in Eliza's mind with terrifying clarity. Clayton hadn't simply inherited Robert's grudge against her. He'd been orchestrating a much larger scheme. "He's behind all of them," she whispered. "That's what I aim to prove." James pulled out a map marked with red X's across multiple territories. Each X represented a dead widow and a stolen fortune. The pattern pointed straight toward Clayton's jurisdiction. He's been traveling under different names, using his sheriff credentials to gain trust. Arranges accidents, then claims inheritances through forged documents and legal manipulation. My husband's weren't accidents either. No, they were competition. Clayton needed them dead to clear his path to your father's fortune. The scope of the conspiracy staggered Eliza. Her personal nightmare was part of something much larger and more deadly. "Marshall Stone is riding here tomorrow," James said. "With your testimony and my evidence, we can stop him." Eliza nodded, finally understanding why James had helped her. Not from simple kindness, but from a deeper sense of justice. He'd been hunting a killer, and she was the key to bringing that killer down. Marshall Catherine Stone arrived at dawn, her badge gleaming against a worn leather coat. She dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years in the saddle chasing dangerous men across unforgiving territory. "Mr. Maxwell," Mrs. Hargraves. She tipped her hat to each in turn. Time we put an end to this business. James led them inside where documents covered his kitchen table like a paper battlefield. Marshall Stone studied the evidence with sharp eyes, her expression growing darker with each page. 17 widows across 5 territories, she said finally. All wealthy, all dead under suspicious circumstances, all with property mysteriously transferred to shell companies. Eliza traced the timeline with her finger. It goes back 7 years, before my first marriage. Clayton's been planning this longer than we thought. Marshall Stone pulled out additional files from her saddlebags. I've been tracking him under 3 different aliases. Sheriff Clayton Hargraves, Deputy Carl Hayes, Marshal Caleb Harrison. Same man, different jurisdictions. The scope of his deception was staggering. Clayton had built an entire criminal enterprise around his law enforcement credentials. People trusted badges, trusted the authority they represented. How does he claim the inheritances? Eliza asked. Forged wills, falsified debts, claims of kinship with doctored records. He's got corrupt lawyers in 4 territories helping legitimize the thefts. James spread out his map of confirmed murders. He's been working his way systematically across the Southwest. Your inheritance would have been his biggest score yet. Eliza stared at the red marks representing dead women. Each X was someone's daughter, wife, mother. Clayton had destroyed families for money, leaving behind nothing but grief and unanswered questions. My husbands really were murdered. Accidents arranged to look natural. Benjamin's mine shaft was sabotaged. Samuel's horse was spooked deliberately. Robert's river crossing was timed with a flash flood Clayton knew was coming. The truth hit Eliza like a physical blow. She'd carried guilt for 3 deaths that weren't accidents at all. While she'd blamed herself for bringing bad luck, Clayton had been orchestrating murder. He needed them gone to clear his claim on your father's estate, Marshall Stone explained. 3 husbands with potential inheritance rights were obstacles to his plan. But he's Robert's brother. He'd inherit naturally if I died. Not with your father's will specifying direct descent only. Clayton needed you dead and your husbands eliminated to make a clean claim. James poured coffee with steady hands, but Eliza noticed the tension in his shoulders. What's our next move? We need Clayton to incriminate himself. Get him talking about the murders with witnesses present. He's too smart for that, Marshall Stone smiled grimly. Men like Clayton have one weakness, greed. He thinks Eliza's inheritance is still within reach. We use that against him. They spent the morning crafting their trap. Eliza would return to town publicly, appearing to surrender. Clayton would likely try to arrange her death quietly, rather than risk a trial that might expose his broader operations. It's dangerous, James said. If something goes wrong, everything's been dangerous since this started. Eliza felt surprisingly calm. For months she'd been running, reactive, always one step behind Clayton's schemes. Now they were taking control of the game. I'll need to play the broken widow, defeated, ready to confess to crimes I didn't commit. Can you manage that? Eliza had been performing for men her entire adult life, playing the dutiful wife while her husband schemed, acting helpless while managing their affairs. This performance might save her life. I've been acting my whole marriage career. They finalized the details as afternoon shadows lengthened. Marshall Stone would position herself with backup deputies. James would remain close, but hidden. They'd wire the town's telegraph office to summon additional federal support. One more thing, Marshall Stone said. Clayton's been corresponding with associates in California. If he escapes, he's planning to continue operations there. More widows to murder. 12 wealthy women recently widowed by mining accidents. All potential targets. The stakes extended far beyond Eliza's personal situation. They were hunting a serial killer whose ambitions reached across state lines. As evening approached, Eliza prepared for town. She tore her dress strategically, mussed her hair, practiced the defeated posture of a woman ready to surrender. You sure about this? James asked. I'm sure about stopping him. James checked his rifle one final time. Signal if you need immediate help. What if he just shoots me on sight? He won't. Too public. Clayton's survived this long by appearing legitimate. He'll want to stage your death as suicide or accident. Eliza mounted her horse, transformed back into the desperate fugitive she'd been a week ago. But inside, she felt different, stronger. She had allies now, evidence, and most importantly, the truth. James. He looked up from checking his gear. Thank you for believing in me when nobody else would. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. Marshal Stone mounted her own horse. Let's end this thing. They rode toward town as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Behind them, James's ranch sat peaceful in the gathering twilight. Ahead lay confrontation with a killer who'd built his fortune on women's graves. Eliza touched the inheritance letter in her pocket. Tomorrow, she'd either be dead or free to claim her legacy. Either way, Clayton's reign of terror would end. The town's lights flickered in the distance like stars falling to earth. Justice waited somewhere among those buildings, if they were brave enough to seize it. Eliza rode into town as the sun painted the buildings gold and red. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Her torn dress speaking of desperate flight finally ended. Curious faces peered from windows and doorways as the Black Widow returned to face her fate. Clayton emerged from the sheriff's office, his badge catching the dying light. Behind him walked a man Eliza didn't recognize, wearing federal marshal credentials. The corrupt official James had warned her about. Mrs. Hargraves. Clayton's voice carried false sympathy. You look exhausted. Ready to end this running? Eliza dismounted slowly, every movement screaming surrender. I can't keep hiding. I'm tired of being afraid. Smart woman. Marshal Garrett here will ensure you receive fair treatment. Marshal Garrett stepped forward, his eyes cold as winter stone. Ma'am, you're under federal arrest for the murders of Benjamin Caldwell, Samuel Morrison, and Robert Hargraves. A small crowd gathered in the town square. Shopkeepers, ranchers, curious children drawn by the spectacle. Perfect witnesses for what was about to unfold. I need to confess, Eliza said, her voice carrying just far enough. The guilt is killing me. Clayton's eyes lit with predatory satisfaction. Of course. Let's discuss this privately in my office. No. Eliza's refusal surprised him. I've lived with lies too long. These people deserve to hear the truth. Mrs. Hargraves, perhaps we should. I poisoned them, she announced loudly enough for the crowd to hear. All three of my husbands, for their money. The gathered townspeople murmured among themselves. Some nodded knowingly, their suspicions confirmed. Others looked uncomfortable with such public confession. Clayton moved closer, sensing opportunity. Tell us about the poison. Where did you obtain it? Here was the crucial moment. Eliza met his gaze directly, letting calculated fear creep into her voice. The same place you got yours. Clayton's expression flickered for just an instant. I'm sorry? When you killed Martha Cunningham in Texas, Sarah Blackwood in Arizona, all those other wealthy widows across the territories. The crowd's murmuring stopped. Total silence fell over the square like a heavy blanket. Ma'am, you're obviously distraught, Marshal Garrett said quickly. Perhaps we should continue this inside. You murdered my husbands because they were obstacles to claiming my inheritance, just like you've murdered 17 other women for their money. Clayton's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped as he noticed the crowd's intense attention. Too many witnesses. Too public. That's quite an accusation, Mrs. Hargraves. From across the square, Marshal Stone stepped into view. Behind her came two federal deputies, hands resting casually on their weapons. It's quite an accurate accusation, Sheriff. Clayton spun, his face going white as he recognized the real federal authority. Garrett's hand dropped to his pistol, but froze as James appeared from behind the general store, rifle trained on him. I wouldn't, James said quietly. Marshal Stone approached with measured steps, her badge visible to the gathered crowd. Sheriff Clayton Hargraves, you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder and fraud across 5 territories. This is ridiculous. I'm a lawman. You're a killer who hid behind a badge. Eliza pulled the inheritance letter from her pocket, along with copies of the documents James had gathered. Federal investigators have been tracking your movements for months. Every forged will, every falsified death certificate, every stolen inheritance. The townspeople pressed closer, hungry for details of the scandal unfolding before them. 17 wealthy widows dead by your hand, Marshal Stone announced. Their fortunes stolen through an elaborate network of corrupt officials and forged documents. Clayton's composure finally cracked. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can. James stepped forward, his rifle still covering Marshal Garrett. Been corresponding with Marshall Stone for 6 months. Tracking your aliases. Documenting your crimes. Carl Hayes in Arizona, Marshall Stone continued. Caleb Harrison in Texas. Clayton Hargraves here in New Mexico. Same man, same methods, same greed. The fake marshal made his move, drawing his weapon desperately. James's rifle spoke once, the shot echoing off building walls. Garrett dropped his gun, clutching his wounded shoulder. Clayton lunged for Eliza, perhaps thinking to use her as a shield. She sidestepped smoothly and drove her knee into his stomach. Years of suppressed rage found outlet in that single blow. He doubled over, gasping. The crowd cheered approval. "That's for Benjamin," Eliza said, "and Samuel, and Robert, and all the women you murdered for money." Marshall Stone's deputies moved in, shackles ready. The fake marshal was secured first, his shoulder wound bound professionally. Clayton submitted to arrest with sullen resignation. "Mrs. Hargraves," one of the townspeople called out, "we owe you an apology." Others nodded agreement. The woman they'd scorned and whispered about had exposed a conspiracy that threatened widows across the entire Southwest. "You helped catch a killer," the shopkeeper added. "Took real courage." Eliza looked around at faces that had shown her nothing but suspicion and contempt. Now she saw respect, admiration, even guilt for their earlier treatment. "I just wanted the truth to come out." James approached, his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. "It's over." Finally, Marshall Stone finished securing the prisoners and turned to address the crowd. "These men will stand trial for multiple murders. Mrs. Hargraves has been cleared of all charges." The gathering began to disperse, people talking excitedly about the dramatic events they'd witnessed. The Black Widow had been vindicated, the real killers caught. Eliza stood in the town square as shadows lengthened around her, free for the first time in years, ready to claim her inheritance and start building a new life. 3 months later, Eliza stood on the porch of her Colorado ranch house, watching cattle graze across endless grassland. The inheritance had been even more substantial than the lawyer's letter indicated. 20,000 acres of prime grazing land, 2,000 head of cattle, and mineral rights that would ensure prosperity for generations. She was no longer the Black Widow. The newspapers had taken to calling her the Vindicated Widow, though she preferred simply being called Mrs. Maxwell now. James emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. The wedding ring on his finger caught the morning sunlight. 3 weeks married, and he still looked surprised by his good fortune. "Eastern buyers confirmed," he said. "They'll take the entire spring herd at premium prices. Your negotiating skills or my reputation? Both, I'd say." The trial had made headlines across 3 territories. Clayton's conviction for multiple murders had vindicated not just Eliza, but 17 other women, whose deaths had been dismissed as accidents. Their families finally had answers. Their killers faced justice. Marshall Stone rode up the long drive, dust trailing behind her horse. She'd become a frequent visitor, partly for business, but mostly for the friendship that had grown between the 3 unlikely allies. "Morning, Catherine," Eliza called. "Morning. Brought news from the trial in California." They gathered around the porch table where Eliza poured fresh coffee. The legal proceedings had stretched across multiple states as prosecutors untangled Clayton's network of corruption. "Guilty on all counts," Marshall Stone reported. "Him and 6 associates. They'll hang next month." Justice, at last. Eliza felt the final weight lift from her shoulders. The nightmare that had defined her adult life was truly over. "What about the stolen inheritances?" James asked. "Federal court ordered full restitution to surviving family members. Your testimony was crucial in establishing the pattern." Eliza nodded. Speaking at the trials had been painful but necessary. 17 families deserved to know how their loved ones really died. A rider appeared on the horizon, approaching at an urgent pace. The ranch foreman, Miguel Santos, galloped up to the house with news. "Mrs. Maxwell, visitors coming. Fancy carriage with federal escort. More lawyers?" "No, ma'am. Ladies in morning dress." 20 minutes later, a black carriage pulled up to the house. 4 women emerged, all wearing widow's weeds, but carrying themselves with dignity rather than defeat. Eliza recognized them from newspaper photographs. Families of Clayton's victims. The eldest stepped forward. "Mrs. Maxwell, I'm Dorothy Blackwood. Sarah was my daughter. Eliza's throat tightened. Sarah had been one of the first victims, murdered 3 years ago in Arizona. Her death had looked like a riding accident. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry for your loss. Or, don't be sorry. Be proud. Your courage gave us justice. The other women nodded agreement. Martha Cunningham's sister, Patricia Monroe's mother. Representatives of families who had suffered in silence until Eliza's investigation exposed the truth. We wanted to thank you personally, another woman said, for not giving up when everyone believed the lies. They spent the afternoon sharing stories of their lost daughters, sisters, friends. Each woman had been vibrant, intelligent, full of life, until Clayton decided her wealth was worth more than her existence. Sarah was planning to start a school for ranch children, Dorothy said. She had the money and the dream. Clayton stole both. We're starting a fund, Martha's sister announced, in memory of all 17 victims, to help widows who find themselves vulnerable and alone. Eliza immediately pledged a substantial contribution. These women were transforming their grief into purpose, ensuring their loved ones' deaths meant something positive. As evening approached, the visitors prepared to leave. Dorothy Blackwood took Eliza's hands in hers. You gave us closure, dear. More importantly, you prevented future victims. I had help, good people who believed in justice. The best people usually do. After the carriage disappeared down the drive, Eliza and James sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Any regrets? He asked. About what? Giving up the quiet life for all this attention? Eliza considered the question seriously. The trials, interviews, and public appearances had been exhausting, but necessary. No regrets about seeking justice. Some regrets about the years I wasted feeling guilty for things I didn't do. James reached for her hand. Those years made you who you are now. Strong enough to fight back. Smart enough to win. A comfortable silence settled between them as stars emerged in the darkening sky. The ranch house glowed with warm lamplight, a beacon of safety and prosperity carved from years of pain and struggle. Do you ever think about that first day? Eliza asked, when I stumbled onto your land half dead. Every morning when I wake up grateful. I asked you what you wanted from me. I remember. Eliza turned to face him fully. Do you want something from me now, rancher? James smiled, the same gentle expression that had first convinced her to trust. Same thing I wanted then. Nothing but the chance to prove good men exist. And now? Now I want to spend every remaining day proving I was right to believe in you. The question that had once represented her deepest fear now carried entirely different meaning. She'd found a man who truly wanted nothing from her except the privilege of standing beside her as an equal partner. The Black Widow's heartbreaking question had become the foundation of an unbreakable love.